So this is going to be page 3, which is the first page of the book, and this is where we're starting. This is for anybody who wasn't here for the beginning of the book. Here we go. The prisoner in the photo is me. The ID number is mine. The photo was taken in 1972 at the Medium Security Federal Correctional Institution in Ashland. Let me make sure you can see this. Ashland, Kentucky. I was 21 years old and had been locked up for a year already. The bleakest year of my life, and I had more time ahead of me. At the time this picture was taken, I weighed 125 pounds. When I look at my face in the photo, I see nothing but the pocked mask I was hiding behind. I parted my hair down the middle and grew a mustache in order to look older and tougher. And with the greasy prison diet, salted chicken gizzards in a larded gravy with chicken wings with oily cheese sauce, deep-fried chicken necks, and the stress and the troubled dreams of capture and release, there was no controlling the acne. I was overmatched. And here's the picture on the front. It doesn't look as bad as he's describing. I might have been slight, but I was a smart and cagey. I managed to avoid a lot of trouble because I knew how to blend in and generally sift through the days unnoticed by men who spent the majority of their time looking to inflict pain on others. I called these men skulls. Now this is one of the questions for you. I call these men skulls, and they were freaks for violence. Here we are, all of us living in constant pissy misery, and instead of trying to feel more human, more free and unchained in their hearts by simply respecting one another and getting along, many of the men found cruel and menacing ways to make each day a walk through a tunnel of fear for others. Fear of being a target of irrational violence haunted me day and night. Now that is upsetting. The constant tempo of the violence pulsed through my body and made me feel small and weak and cowardly. But no matter how big you were, there was no preventing the brutality. I had seen the results of violence so often, with the guys hauling off and smashing someone's face with their fist or with a metal tool, a baseball bat, a rock, and all for no reason other than some imagined defense, or see if I can get a better view on this, or to establish a reputation for savagery. Sorry, I'm trying to do this better. When I lived and worked in the prison hospital, especially after I had become the x-ray technician, I was part of an emergency medical response team. I was called on day and night to x-ray all types of ugly wounds, to see if the bones behind the bruised or bleeding flesh had been cracked, chipped, or broken. As we examined them, the patient would be telling the guards, I didn't even know the guy, or my greatest fear, I never even heard them, never even saw them. That would be frightening. It was this lottery of violence that haunted me. Your number could be up anywhere, anytime, in the dark of night. While you slept in a dormitory with 100 other men, or in full daylight on the exercise field while you strolled in the sun. Imagine not ever thinking that you were safe, like not even while you were sleeping. Once in the cafeteria line, standing directly next to a guard, I watched a skinny black kid stab some other blood with a dinner fork. He drove it into the guy's collarbone so deep that the doctor had to remove it with a pair of surgical pliers. AIDS wasn't a factor then. The blood that sprayed over the food trays was wiped off by the line workers, and then they just kept spooning up our chow. I wasn't raised around this level of violence. I wasn't prepared for it, and I have never forgotten it. Even now, when walking some of Boston's meaner streets, I find myself moving like a knife, carving my way around people, cutting myself out of their picture, and leaving nothing of myself behind but a hole. Now that's how he gets the title of the book, Nothing But a Hole. Now, this is also a great metaphor. He's comparing himself to a knife, right? Like most kids, I was aware that the world was filled with dangerous people, yet I wasn't certain I could always spot them coming. My dad, however, was a dead-eye when it came to spotting the outlaw classes. He had never been in prison, but he always seemed to know who had spent time in the big house, or who was headed down that path. In his own way, he tried to warn me about going in that direction. When I was young, he would drive the family from Florida back to our hometown in western Pennsylvania to visit relatives. Once we were there, he'd troll the streets with me in our big Buick and point to guys he knew and tell me something wicked or weird or secret about them. He killed a man with a pitchfork, Dad would say, nodding slyly towards some hulking farmer in a bib overalls. Look at his hands. He's strong SOB. Could strangle the life out of a cow. Or Dad would point to a woman. She had a kid when she was in 9th grade and sold it to a neighbor. He knew it all. He burned down a barn. He shot a cop. He robbed a bank. Dad went on and on. I was always surprised at how many people from such a small town had been in prison, and I was really surprised that after committing such despicable acts, they were back out on the streets. They were a scary-looking lot, misshapen, studded with warts and moles, and I was glad we were in the car, but not for long. He'd take me to the Elks Club or the AmVets Hall or Hecla Gun Club in order to get up close and personal with some of the criminal class. He'd order a beer and get me a Coke and some sort of food treat that came out of a gallon pickle jar of beet red vinegar, a hard-boiled egg, or a swatch of pig skin, or a hunk of kielbasa. Everything smelled like a biology specimen, and with the first bite and red juice spurted out and ran down my chin. Now that's great imagery. Disgusting, but great. I must have looked like I'd split my lip in the bar brawl. Then, once when we were settled, Dad would continue to point out the criminals, all the while using his Irish whisper, which could be heard in the next town over. He pointed out the bank robbers, the church robbers, car thieves, and shadowy second-floor man known for snatching jewelry from the bedrooms of sleeping homeowners. I began to imagine the entire town was some sort of bizarre experimental prison camp without walls, a punishment center where criminals were sentenced to living only with other criminals. Now, this makes you have to stop and wonder, is like, if his dad's so easily able to pick these people out, maybe he actually knows them or he's one of them because, maybe he spent time being a criminal himself. Dad snapped his fingers. These folks zigged when the rest of the world zagged, and once you cross that line, there's no coming back. Mark my words. Again, mark my words means like, I know. All of this was my father's way of letting me know he was in the know. He had the dirt on everyone, and it was the dirt that made them interesting. At the same time, he made it clear that they were damaged goods and could never come clean again. Now, those are powerful words because Jack has already been in prison, and it makes you wonder if he always is going to feel that about himself. Dad's keen eye for spotting criminals of all stripes was impressive, but it wasn't perfect because he never had me pegged for being one of them. But it makes you question, was Jack ever one of them? Was he really that bad, or did he just make bad choices? And are all the people that went to prison, did they just make bad choices and then become worse once they were in prison? Ironically, in spite of all of the fear and remorse and self-loathing, being locked up in prison is where I fully realized I had to change my life for the better. And in one significant way I did. It's where I went from thinking about becoming a writer to actually writing. I began to write stories, secret stories about myself and the restless men around me. While among them I may have feigned disinterest, but like my father, I watched them closely and I listened whenever they spoke. Then, back in my cell, I would sit on the edge of my bunk with my journal spread open across my knees and try to capture their stories with my own words. For some paranoid reason, the warden would not allow us to keep journals. He probably didn't want the level of violence and sex among both prisoners and guards to be documented. My secret journal was an old hardback copy of the Brother Karamazov by Dostoevsky, in which I spent hours writing in tiny script between the tightly printed lines. I kept the book like Gideon's Bible under my top locker, and as far as I know, its true purpose was never discovered. Now, that was actually smart of him because not too many people are reading Dostoevsky for fun, so they would never expect that his journal was actually secretly written in the margins. Someone once said anyone can be great under rosy circumstances, but the true test of character is measured by how well a person makes decisions during difficult times. That's a really powerful quote, and I think it's true most of the time. I certainly believe this to be true. I made a lot of mistakes and went to jail, but I wasn't on the road to ruin like everybody said. While I was locked up, I pulled myself together and I made some good decisions. Like any book about mistakes and redemption, Oscar Wilde's De Profundis is my favorite. The mistakes are far more interesting to read about and write about. So I'll start with where I think I went around the bend. Now, this is great because this is a great example of both foreshadowing and flashback all in one.